The first generation Toyota Venza first appeared in 2009 as a sort of funky crossover wagon type vehicle before it would eventually be discontinued in 2015 following poor sales. The second generation Toyota Venza would appear after a 6-year hiatus in 2021, now as a mid-size SUV slotting in between the compact RAV4 and its bigger sibling, the Toyota Highlander.
Today's video is sponsored by Land Air Sea. Keep tabs on all your valuable assets from the palm of your hand. Remember, with Land Air Sea, theft is temporary. Visit landairSea.com to order your Land Air Sea GPS unit for your classic vehicle.
So the base model of the second generation Toyota Venza starts at just over $34,000, with the car that we have that we'll be looking at today priced at just $41,665. Starting with the exterior, the most important part to cover is of course Nightshade. So this being a Nightshade edition, one of the things that they added was for those people who looked at a Venza and said, I love this car, but I wish it had more black. That's what the Nightshade edition is. We have lots more black, different features, door handles, things that I'll show you as we move around the car. So looking at the very front of the nose here, one of the things you'll note is we have some black here, but then we have a chrome Toyota badge, of course, with the blue highlighting that this is a hybrid, exclusively hybrid model across the whole option, no matter which Venza you choose to go to, which of course we'll get into that more later. And then the bottom, of course, has some black bumpers as well. But looking at more here, what we have is a beautiful ruby flare metallic paint job, and it looks absolutely stunning in the sunlight. It's a little bit overcast right now, so it doesn't do it justice with the metallic paint in here. On the side, we have these beautiful 19-inch wheels, which is a 1-inch increase over the stock option, and of course, finished in black because we have the Nightshade. Then we have some more black trim. We have some black mirror caps here as well, a black roof, which maintains some of our Rolls-Royce features that we'll talk about in the interior. Then we have our door handles with keyless entry. Those are also finished in black. So coming around to the rear, we have more black badging. We have Venza on the one side, XLE on the other, but then remember how I pointed out that chrome badge up front? Well, on the rear, we actually have a black Toyota badge that then has the same hybrid bluing around it. One of the things I thought was odd was why would the front badge be chrome and then the rear be black? You would think for the Nightshade, all of the badges would be black. Not something that should deter you from purchasing the vehicle, just something that I thought was a little bit odd, at least on the Nightshade edition. Coming to the rear here, I love the way this looks. It really reminds me of the Jaguar F-Pace in terms of its aggressive styling. It looks very sleek, and it even has a rear glass wiper, which is something you don't really see too much anymore on some of these modern cars. But that is just a quick look at the Nightshade's exterior, pretty standard across the Venza board other than some more black accents. And now it's time to move to talk about the powertrain. All right, so opening up the hood of our 2023 Toyota Venza, what you'll find in here is an exclusive powertrain. No matter which Venza you order, you get this engine option. This is a 2.5-liter 4-cylinder hybrid system, which is actually very similar to the RAV4, which the Venza sits on the same platform of. What you've got here is a 2.5-liter 4-cylinder producing a net output of 219 horsepower with 3 electric motors, again, just like the RAV4. And then that is mated to an e-CVT transmission, which then provides options to push power to all 4 wheels as part of the part-time all-wheel drive system, meaning it's mostly front-wheel drive until it needs to activate the motor sitting on the rear wheels, so there's no drive shaft to use the rear wheels and give the Venza all-wheel drive. So a pretty cool system there. Now there's a couple cool quirks that are going on because of this, one of which being the fact that the 0 to 60 for the Venza is about 7.1 seconds. And I know normally 0 to 60s are reserved for sports cars, but the reason I pointed out is that is surprisingly quick for an SUV. That'll actually beat out some of the competitors in the market like the Subaru Outback. So I think that's one of the really interesting quirks. Another cool thing about this vehicle is now the EPA rating for this car is about 40 city and 37 highway. And I'm happy to say that in our time with the vehicle, we actually maintained at or above the EPA rating. So I'm pretty impressed with the vehicle because we were actually able to get better gas mileage than the tests that the EPA was running here in Phoenix, Arizona. So I think that's a really cool blend. And that's a quick look at the hybrid drivetrain, which is again, the same across the board. And it does some cool engine management stuff to work with the hybrid system and maximize fuel economy by keeping the revs down of the engine to mesh with the electric motors. So now that we've got a quick look at what's powering the Venza, let's go ahead and let's move to the interior and see what's going on in there. Okay, so moving on to the interior of our Venza here, we have what is a very stately and mature styling. I really like the way everything looks in here, but there are some items that kind of feel like an afterthought. What I should point out though is sitting in these seats is actually really comfortable. So, first thing, the afterthoughts. There's some weird things, like the first thing you'll notice is the starter switch. We have this storage area here just in front of the shifter, which is pretty common for a lot of Toyota and Lexus designed vehicles. It's also where the cheap wireless charger is, which works fantastic, by the way. And the starter button just sits here awkwardly in its own sort of contained piece of plastic that, if you're the driver, obstructs your view of some of the charging ports. Now, of course, you can lean, get over there, plug stuff in, or have your passenger, if you have one with you, plug that in. I just thought it was something that's a little bit awkward. Another thing that surprised me, when I went to go play some music, I nearly got my eardrums blown out because there is no volume knob on this. And when I went to look for that, it doesn't exist on our 12.3-inch display, which is one of the new options for the 2023 model year. Now, the display itself is fantastic, but there's only plus and minus buttons here. Same thing with the steering wheel. Basically, you have the same controls both on the steering wheel and on the actual display itself, which would have been really nice to have a volume knob. I'm the type of person where I like to be able to quickly just throw the volume down and adjust it that way. You still have the buttons, of course, but it would have been nice to have a volume knob. It just feels like a little bit of an afterthought. You do have separate climate control for both the driver and passenger, so you guys can set it up any way you want. Perfect for long road trips, or if you're with someone that might have a different sense of temperature. We do have a sort of standard black interior in here that, again, complements nicely the beautiful red that we have on the outside. One of the things I really like that you don't see too much of these days is going to be the gauge cluster. So the gauge cluster actually has two analog gauges. We have a speedo, and then we have our sort of standard gauge display that helps with some of our eco adjustments, with an MID or multi-informational display that's in the middle. Of course, that's electric, fully adjustable with a ton of menu options in there. One of the odd things is the speedometer actually jumps by 20 miles an hour with 9 ticks in between, which means every tick is 2 miles an hour. And that's a little bit odd for most speedometers, not totally unusual for Toyota. I do know that the 4Runner comes with something similar, but just something I wanted to point out. Don't think it should sway your opinion, because you can also choose to have your miles per hour also displayed in the MID that I mentioned earlier. So there's tons of options, ways to readjust the car and make it just the way you want it. We have this super comfortable steering wheel, which has cruise control options, as well as your MID display buttons. Adjusting all of that is in here. To my left, you have what are some blank buttons on our car, which is just because we don't have some of the options that would normally be there. Normally, you'd find things like the heated steering wheel button there, but in our case, we just have, of course, our hatch, some of our auto lights, and even traction control and other adjustment methods like brightness. Here we have what is a fairly standard Toyota shifter, and just in front of that we have our EV mode, which is kind of a gimmick. It doesn't really work over 18 miles an hour, or if you accelerate too hard, it'll kick the car out of EV mode. Not really useful. Toyota just recommends it as for people who want to be very silent, either leaving neighborhoods early in the morning, whatever the case is. You don't have to worry about that. If you're worried about how loud it is, this car is very quiet as is, other than some in-cabin noise if you really get on it, similar to any other Toyota Lexus hybrid vehicle. The drive modes in front, we have some basic options as far as just putting it in sport or eco, which I don't really think is needed. Got fantastic gas mileage, keeping the car normal. Behind that, we have some cup holders, and then another interesting thought is, this is the sort of resting position, so to speak, for our center armrest. Obviously, this opens up for more storage, some basic cup stuff, and then, of course, the little storage block down there, but it's also where it hides the heated seats. So, if you're looking for your heated seats, you have the buttons here, which are not traditional buttons per se, but they work just fine. And of course, the heated seats are wonderful to have when it's a little bit chilly out, like it sort of has been lately in Phoenix, at least in the morning. So that's a quick look, just checking out some of the things that are up front in here. But you're probably wondering, when is he going to mention the Rolls-Royce part? Well, that's going to be right here. So our car actually has the panoramic roof, and what this is it's actually kind of foggy right now, and that's because the light is not being supplied to it. And what this is there's a bunch of crystals inside of there that, when energy or power is not being passed through them, they become opaque like this and actually keep out the light, even though you can see the glass is exposed. You hit a button on the top here, and this will apply power, which will move the crystals and make this transparent. This is the stuff that you would see on Rolls-Royces, even Maseratis, and all sorts of other luxury cars that use this technology, but it's available to you in the Venza. So now what we're going to do is we're going to hop in the back seat and take a look at what's going on in there. Okay, so now I'm in the back seat of the Venza, and as you can see, I'm about 6 foot even for reference. You can see my hair does touch and brush along the roof, but I could actually sit back here and I think I could make myself comfortable for a longer road trip. It does make the mid-size part of the Venza a little bit more obvious as you sit back here, and it can obviously feel a little bit compact and cozy, but I think this SUV actually does a pretty good job of making use of space. I think you could actually fit 4 adults in this comfortably. Not so sure about using this middle seat, I would say. Maybe if you had some really young kids, but this is definitely the perfect type of vehicle for empty nesters that really don't need to use the back seat much, or maybe would just end up putting a dog back here, or occasionally their kids anytime they come to visit. So a really cool look. You do have some vents and some charging ports like usual, but basically a no frills, probably doesn't need to be used very often, will do exactly what it needs to do when you ask of it, and it's actually not too bad, not too comfortable. So that's a quick look at the back seat. Okay, so now we're gonna go ahead and shift our Venza into drive, and let's see what it's like out on the road. So just going right off the bat, the Venza is actually a really nice vehicle. I was actually quite impressed with it. It feels like it has a fairly smooth as far as traversing things like bumps, and it feels really good in terms of steering. It is a little bit higher boosted than I would have personally liked from a power steering perspective, but it's gonna be really easy to drive as an SUV. I would liken it almost more to a car than I would to an SUV or a truck, which a lot of people really prefer. They want the higher up advantage of the SUV, but want a driving experience that's going to be really easy and manageable, something that you could easily throw into a parking spot, and that's what you have here with the Venza. Now, some of the other cool things, like I mentioned earlier, comes from the customizability that you have in the multifunctional display in here while driving. So, a lot of people have different preferences as opposed to what they would like to put on the inside of their vehicle there. And for me, for example, I think in a vehicle like this, it's fun to be able to look at your miles per gallon and see what sort of fuel economy you're getting while you're driving this vehicle. And let's say you're a little bit new to the whole fuel economy game and want to know what steps you can actually take to improve your driving and save more money on gas. Well, the Venza has a eco zone, and in that eco zone, it'll actually start recommending things based off of your inputs into the car on where you would be able to actually save more gas and be more efficient in your driving, which I think is a pretty cool feature. Obviously in this advent, we have so many hybrid vehicles that exist today, all for the sake of saving money, but nobody really tells you the proper way to drive some of these vehicles. It does obviously have the sort of charge eco power options like you see with a lot of hybrid products that help tell you where you might be a little bit heavy-footed on the driving side, but this has some extra steps in there along with some other driving options. Now moving on to the driving options themselves, I mentioned earlier just in front of the shifter here we have Sport and Eco mode. I think the Eco mode is kind of whatever because this vehicle is already really efficient as it is. Personally, in our time, I left it in normal and found myself again at or exceeding those EPA ratings of 40 city and 37 highway. Now on the sport mode, what that's going to do is that's going to increase some of the resistance here, and it's going to try to make it feel like the car's sticking up in higher revs and kind of holding the engine out for revving, even though this is a CVT transmission, which means there is no actual gearing. This is obviously the rubber band conical drive all the way down for that feeling. However, I am happy to say that Toyota and Lexus have gotten into a really good habit of getting rid of some of the CVT rubber bandness when you buy one of their vehicles like that. So you don't really experience that in the Venza. Overall, it's just a really good driving experience that's fairly quiet. Like I said, you do get a fair amount of engine noise from time to time, especially when you creep into that power zone. You can hear the car groan a little bit, but it does pick up pretty good when you do need to use all of that 219 horsepower. Some of the other cool things, if you are interested, just because it is a hybrid vehicle with tons of technology and Rolls-Royce features, what you can do is you can manage and see when the car is utilizing the all-wheel drive features of the car, where it's sending power, and when it is best to actually save and use some of the battery technology that's available in the vehicle. So I think that's pretty cool. It just kind of adds to the driving experience. You can make it really whatever you want it to be. And I think this is a huge improvement, and I think offers a lot more than the original first generation Venza by creating that mid-size platform that offers more than the RAV4, but not the full-size sort of Highlander experience that people don't want the bulkiness. But personally, my favorite thing is you have a fairly good driving SUV that is also available in beautiful styling. I think this is one of the best looking vehicles in Toyota's lineup, aside from maybe some of the sports cars, not to mention some of the fastest because of that pretty quick 0 to 60 time. So this vehicle is available with a variety of trims starting at $34,000, relatively affordable, especially when you're looking at a SUV or a Toyota product that you know has the reliability in the name. A pretty unique vehicle that I think if you're interested in, you should go to a dealer and check it out for yourself, because ultimately I can tell you what I think, but you need to make sure you take it for a test drive and make sure it's what you're looking for as well. But hopefully I managed to get you excited about the Venza as I am, and you'll be able to look into that. Now, if you guys enjoyed this video, could hit that like button for us, really appreciate it, and consider subscribing for more content like this in the future. Thank you so much for watching.